Sarah Martinez sat in the back corner of the music room, hoping nobody would notice her. She had been doing this for 3 years now. Every day she would slip into the classroom just before the bell rang and find the seat farthest from Mrs. Chun's piano. She would keep her head down and her mouth shut. This way, she could get through another music class without anyone asking her to do anything scary. The music room was loud that Tuesday morning. 23 students talked and laughed. While they waited for class to start, Sarah watched them from her corner. There was Jessica, who could sing like the people on television. There was Marcus, who played guitar so well that everyone stopped talking when he practiced. And there was Amy, who had been taking piano lessons since she was 5 years old. Sarah was not like them. She could not sing very well. She did not play any instruments. She only took music class because the school said she had to. Her real dream was to become invisible and get through high school without embarrassing herself. Mrs. Chun walked into the room carrying a stack of papers. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair that she always wore in a neat bun. Everyone liked Mrs. Chun because she never yelled and she always smiled. But today, Sarah noticed something different about her teacher's smile. It looked like the kind of smile grown-ups had when they were about to give you bad news. "Good morning, everyone," Mrs. Chun said. The room got quiet. "I have something exciting to tell you about." Sarah felt her stomach drop. In her experience, when teachers said something was exciting, it usually meant more work or something that would make her nervous. Mrs. Chun held up the papers. "These are sign-up sheets for our spring recital. Every student in this class will perform a solo piece for your families and friends." The room exploded with noise. Some students cheered. Others groaned. Sarah felt like she might throw up. "Mrs. Chun," Jessica called out, raising her hand high, "can we pick any song we want?" "Almost any song," Mrs. Chun replied. "It should be appropriate for school, and it should be something you can perform in 3 minutes or less. You can sing, play an instrument, or do both." Marcus was already talking to his friends about what guitar songs he might play. Amy was asking about classical piano pieces. Everyone seemed excited, or at least okay with the idea. Everyone except Sarah. She raised her hand slowly. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. "Yes, Sarah?" Mrs. Chun asked. She sounded surprised. Sarah almost never spoke in class. "Do we have to do this?" Sarah asked. Her voice came out as a whisper. Mrs. Chun's expression became gentle. "Yes, dear. Everyone participates, but don't worry. I'll help you find something perfect for you." After class, Sarah tried to leave quickly, but Mrs. Chun called her name. "Sarah, could you stay for a moment?" Sarah walked slowly to the teacher's desk. She stared at her shoes. "I know this feels scary," Mrs. Chun said, "but I think this could be good for you." "I'm not good at music," Sarah said. "I can't sing like Jessica. I don't play guitar like Marcus. I don't even know how to play piano. Mrs. Chun smiled. "Do you know what I've noticed about you, Sarah?" Sarah shook her head. "You listen. Really listen. When other students are performing, you pay attention to every note, every word. That tells me you understand music even if you don't think you do." Sarah looked up for the first time. "But I don't know how to perform." "We'll start simple," Mrs. Chun said. "Very simple. Come with me." Mrs. Chun led Sarah to the piano. She sat down and patted the bench beside her. Sarah sat down carefully. "Put your right hand here," Mrs. Chun said, showing Sarah where to place her fingers on the keys. "Now press this key." Sarah pressed the key. A clear, pretty note filled the room. "Now this one," Mrs. Chun said, pointing to the next key. Sarah pressed it, then the next one, and the next one. Soon she was playing a simple melody. It was just 5 notes, but they sounded nice together. "What was that?" Sarah asked. "That's the beginning of an old folk song called Simple Gifts," Mrs. Chun said. "It's one of the most beautiful melodies ever written, and it only uses a few notes." Sarah played the 5 notes again. This time she listened more carefully. The melody was pretty. It was peaceful. It made her feel calm. "Could I learn the whole song?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Chun's face lit up. "Of course. It's perfect for you." The entire song only uses 8 different notes, and the rhythm is very simple. But Sarah, simple doesn't mean easy. This song has been loved by people for hundreds of years because it's beautiful. That afternoon, Sarah went home and told her parents about the recital. Her mother, Rosa, was washing dishes in the kitchen. Her father, Miguel, was reading the newspaper at the table. "A solo performance?" her mother asked. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mia?" Sarah's parents loved her very much, but they knew she was shy. They had watched her hide behind them at family parties. They had seen her refuse to read aloud in other classes. They worried about her getting embarrassed in front of so many people. "I have to do it," Sarah said. "Everyone has to. But Mrs. Chen is going to teach me an easy song." Her father looked up from his newspaper. "What kind of song?" "It's called Simple Gifts. It's old and pretty." Her mother dried her hands on a towel and sat down at the table. "Do you think you can learn it in time?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. She thought about the 5 notes she had played that day. She thought about how peaceful they had made her feel. "I think so," she said. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the recital. 3 months seemed like a long time, but it also seemed like no time at all. She imagined herself sitting at the piano in front of all those people. The thought made her nervous, but for the first time, it didn't make her want to run away. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could learn this simple song and get through the performance without embarrassing herself. It wouldn't be exciting like Jessica's singing or impressive like Marcus's guitar playing, but it would be hers. She closed her eyes and hummed the 5 notes Mrs. Chun had taught her. They were simple notes, but they were beautiful. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Sarah woke up thinking about piano keys. She had dreamed about the 5 notes Mrs. Chun had taught her. In her dream, she could play them perfectly, and they sounded like music from heaven. But now, sitting on the edge of her bed, she felt nervous again. At breakfast, her little brother Carlos bounced in his chair. "Sarah's going to be in a concert," he announced to their parents, even though they already knew. "It's not a concert," Sarah said quietly. "It's just a recital." "What's the difference?" Carlos asked. Sarah didn't know how to explain it. A concert sounded big and important. A recital sounded smaller, but still scary. Her mother poured orange juice into glasses. "When is this recital, Mia?" "May 15th, Sarah said. "That's 12 weeks away." Her father looked up from his coffee. 12 weeks is plenty of time to learn one song. Sarah nodded, but inside she wasn't so sure. She had never learned to play any instrument. What if 12 weeks wasn't enough? What if she couldn't do it? At school, the music room was buzzing with excitement. Everyone was talking about the recital. Jessica had already picked her song. She was going to sing a song from a popular musical. Marcus was going to play a rock song on his guitar. Amy was going to play a piece by Mozart. Sarah listened to everyone's plans and felt smaller and smaller. Their songs sounded difficult and impressive. Her simple folk song seemed boring compared to rock music and Mozart. "What are you going to play, Sarah?" asked Jennifer, a girl who sat near the front of the class. "A folk song," Sarah said quietly. "Which one?" Jennifer asked. "Simple Gifts," Sarah replied. Jennifer looked confused. "I've never heard of it." "It's old," Sarah explained. "It's about being happy with simple things." Jennifer nodded politely and turned to talk to someone else about their song choice. Sarah felt like she had given the wrong answer to a test question. During class, Mrs. Chun called each student to her desk to talk about their song choices. When it was Sarah's turn, she walked slowly to the front of the room. "How are you feeling?" "About Simple Gifts?" Mrs. Chun asked. "I think it might be too easy," Sarah said. "Everyone else is doing harder songs." Mrs. Chun leaned forward in her chair. "Sarah, let me tell you something about this song. It was written by a religious group called the Shakers more than 200 years ago. They believed that the best life was a simple life. This song has been sung and played by thousands of musicians because it touches people's hearts." "But it's not hard to play," Sarah said. "Hard doesn't always mean better," Mrs. Chun replied. "Some of the most beautiful music in the world is simple music. Think about Happy Birthday. Everyone knows it, everyone loves it, and it's very simple. Mrs. Chun was right, but Sarah still felt worried. She didn't want people to think she was lazy or that she had picked an easy song because she couldn't do anything harder. "Let's start learning it today," Mrs. Chun said. "Come sit at the piano." For the next 20 minutes, Mrs. Chun taught Sarah the first part of Simple Gifts. The melody was indeed simple, but learning to play it with both hands was harder than Sarah had expected. Her left hand was supposed to play simple chords while her right hand played the melody. It was like trying to rub her stomach and pat her head at the same time. "Don't worry," Mrs. Chun said when Sarah struggled. "This is normal. Your brain is learning to do two different things at once. It takes practice." When class ended, Mrs. Chun wrote down some notes for Sarah to practice at home. "Remember," she said, "practice a little bit every day. 15 minutes is better than trying to practice for 2 hours once a week." Sarah folded the paper carefully and put it in her backpack. She didn't have a piano at home, but Mrs. Chun had said she could practice the finger movements on any flat surface, like a table that afternoon. Sarah sat at the kitchen table and practiced moving her fingers like she was playing piano keys. Her mother watched from across the room. "What are you doing, Mia?" her mother asked. "Practicing piano," Sarah said. "Mrs. Chun said I can practice the finger movements even without a real piano." Her mother came over to watch. Sarah showed her the melody, moving her right-hand fingers in the pattern Mrs. Chun had taught her. "That's very clever," her mother said. "Play it for me." Sarah hummed the melody while she moved her fingers. It was the first time she had ever performed music for anyone, even in this simple way. Her mother listened carefully. "It's beautiful," her mother said when Sarah finished. "It sounds peaceful. Do you really think so?" Sarah asked. "Yes," her mother said. "It reminds me of the lullabies my grandmother used to sing to me when I was little." That evening, Sarah's father came home from work and found her still practicing. At the kitchen table, her fingers moved in the same pattern over and over again. "How's the piano playing going?" he asked. "It's harder than I thought," Sarah admitted. "My left hand doesn't want to do different things than my right hand." Her father sat down next to her. "You know, when I was learning to drive, I had the same problem. My feet wanted to do the same thing, but I needed one foot for the gas and one foot for the brake." "How did you learn?" Sarah asked. "Practice," her father said, "and patience, and remembering that everyone learns at their own speed." Over the next few weeks, Sarah practiced every day. She practiced her finger movements. At the kitchen table, she practiced humming the melody while she walked to school. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she stayed after music class to practice on the real piano with Mrs. Chun. Slowly, her hands began to work together. The melody became smoother. The chords started to sound right. But every time she heard her classmates talking about their songs, she felt worried again. Jessica was taking extra voice lessons to prepare for her musical theater song. Marcus had learned 3 different rock songs and was trying to decide which one to perform. Amy was practicing her Mozart piece for 2 hours every day. "Maybe I should pick a harder song," Sarah told Mrs. Chun one day after practice. "Why?" Mrs. Chun asked. "Everyone else is working so hard on their songs. Mine feels too easy." Mrs. Chun sat down on the piano bench next to Sarah. "Let me ask you something. When you play Simple Gifts, how does it make you feel?" Sarah thought about it. "Peaceful," she said. "Happy, like everything is going to be okay." "And when you hear other people talking about their songs, how do you feel?" "Nervous," Sarah admitted. "Like I'm not doing enough." Mrs. Chun nodded. "I understand. But Sarah, music isn't a competition. It's not about who can play the hardest song or who can practice the most hours. Music is about sharing feelings with other people. But what if people think my song is boring?" Sarah asked. "What if they don't?" Mrs. Chun replied. "What if they think it's beautiful? What if it makes them feel peaceful and happy, just like it makes you feel?" Sarah had never thought about it that way. She had been so worried about what other people would think that she had forgotten about how the music made her feel. "Besides," Mrs. Chun added with a smile, "simple doesn't mean easy to do well. Anyone can play the notes of Simple Gifts, but not everyone can make it sound beautiful. That takes something special. What does it take? Sarah asked. Heart, Mrs. Chun said. It takes playing with your heart. That night, Sarah practiced at the kitchen table again. But this time, instead of worrying about whether the song was hard enough, she thought about how it made her feel. She thought about peace and happiness and simple gifts. For the first time since the recital was announced, Sarah smiled while she practiced. The day of the recital arrived faster than Sarah had expected. May 15th came with bright sunshine and a clear blue sky. Sarah woke up early, even though the recital wasn't until 7 o'clock that evening. Her stomach felt like it was full. Of jumping frogs. At breakfast, nobody talked much. Even Carlos was quiet, which almost never happened. Sarah's parents seemed nervous too, though they tried to hide it. Are you ready, Mia? Her mother asked, pouring Sarah a glass of orange juice. Sarah nodded, but she wasn't sure if she was lying. She had practiced Simple Gifts every day for 12 weeks. She could play it without looking at the music. She knew every note by heart. But knowing a song and performing it in front of people were two different things. Remember, her father said, we're proud of you no matter what happens tonight. Sarah appreciated his words, but they also made her more nervous. What if something bad happened? What if she forgot the song? What if her hands shook so much she couldn't play? At school, everyone was talking about the recital. Some students seemed excited. Others looked as nervous as Sarah felt. Mrs. Chun had told them to wear nice clothes and to arrive at the school by 6:30 for a quick rehearsal. During lunch, Sarah sat with her friend Maria, who was not in the music class. Maria was lucky. She didn't have to perform tonight. I'm so nervous, Sarah told Maria. What if I mess up? You won't mess up, Maria said. You've been practicing for months, but what if I do? Maria thought for a moment. Then you mess up, so what? Everyone will forget about it in a week. Sarah knew Maria was trying to help, but thinking about messing up in front of everyone didn't make her feel better. That afternoon, Sarah went home and tried to relax. She took a long shower and washed her hair. She put on the dress her mother had bought for the recital. It was dark blue with tiny white flowers on it. She felt grown-up wearing it, but also more nervous. At dinner, her family ate quietly. Her mother had made Sarah's favorite meal, but Sarah could barely eat anything. Her stomach was too full of nerves to have room for food. You should eat something, her mother said gently. I can't, Sarah replied. I feel too nervous. Her father reached across the table and patted her hand. That's normal before a performance. Even professional musicians get nervous. Really? Sarah asked. Really, her father said. Being nervous means you care about doing well. At 6 o'clock, the whole family got in the car to drive to school. The ride seemed both too long and too short. Sarah wanted more time to prepare, but she also wanted to get it over with. The school parking lot was full of cars. Parents and families were walking toward the building, many carrying flowers for their young performers. Sarah saw her classmates arriving with their families. Everyone looked dressed up and important. Inside the school, the hallways buzzed with activity. Students in nice clothes hurried toward the music room for the rehearsal. Parents found their way to the auditorium to get good seats. Sarah's family hugged her bye at the music room door. We'll be cheering for you, her mother said. Not too loud, Sarah said quickly. She didn't want everyone looking at her family. Mrs. Chun was waiting in the music room with a clipboard and a calm smile. How is everyone feeling? She asked the group of nervous students. Scared, said Jennifer honestly. Good, Mrs. Chun said. Scared means you care. Let's do a quick rehearsal so you can see how everything works. Mrs. Chun led them into the auditorium. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The room looked huge. There were rows and rows of chairs, and many of them were already filled with families. The stage looked enormous and bright under the lights. Each of you will walk up these steps, Mrs. Chun explained, pointing to the side of the stage. You'll go to your instrument, perform your piece, take a bow, and walk off the other side. Simple and easy. Nothing about it seemed simple or easy to Sarah, The piano sat in the center of the stage under a bright spotlight. It looked like the most frightening place in the world. One by one, Mrs. Chun called students to walk through their entrances and exits. When it was Sarah's turn, she climbed the steps slowly. Her legs felt shaky. She sat at the piano bench and looked out at the audience. The auditorium was huge. There were so many seats, and they were filling up fast. Sarah could see her parents and Carlos sitting in the third row. Her mother waved, and her father gave her a thumbs up. Carlos was bouncing in his seat with excitement. "Just like we practiced." Mrs. Chun called from the side of the stage. "Remember to breathe." Sarah put her hands on the piano keys but didn't play anything. She just wanted to feel the keys under her fingers. They felt cool and smooth, just like the piano in the music room. "Okay, Sarah," Mrs. Chun said. "Come on down." Sarah stood up and walked to the exit steps. Her heart was beating so fast, she could hear it in her ears. Back in the music room, Mrs. Chun gathered all the students in a circle. "You've all worked very hard," she said. "Tonight is about sharing your music with people who love you. Remember why you chose your songs, remember how they make you feel. And most importantly, have fun." Fun seemed impossible to Sarah, but she nodded along with everyone else. The recital was scheduled to start at 7 o'clock. At 10 minutes before 7, Mrs. Chun lined up the students in the order they would perform. Sarah was number 15 out of 23 students. That meant she would have to sit and wait while 14 other people performed before her. "I wish I was going first," Sarah whispered to Jennifer, who was standing next to her in line. "I wish I was going last," Jennifer whispered back. "Then I could get it over with quickly." Neither of them was happy with their place in line. At exactly 7 o'clock, Mrs. Chun walked onto the stage. The audience got quiet. She welcomed everyone and explained how the recital would work. Then she introduced the first student. Jessica was first. She walked onto the stage confidently and sang her musical theater song with a big, beautiful voice. The audience clapped loudly when she finished. Sarah felt proud of Jessica, but also more nervous about her own turn. Marcus was third. He played his rock song on electric guitar, and it sounded amazing. The audience loved it. Some people even cheered. Amy was seventh. Her Mozart piece was complex and impressive. Her fingers moved so fast across the piano keys that Sarah could barely follow them. When Amy finished, the audience clapped for a long time. One by one, Sarah's classmates performed. Some did better than others, but everyone got through their songs. The audience was kind and supportive. They clapped for everyone, even when someone made mistakes. Finally, Mrs. Chun called Sarah's name. "Next, we have Sarah Martinez performing Simple Gifts." Sarah's legs felt like they were made of jello as she climbed the steps to the stage. The lights were brighter than she remembered from rehearsal. The audience looked bigger, too. She could see hundreds of faces looking at her. She walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. She adjusted the bench height just like Mrs. Chun had taught her. She placed her hands on the keys and looked out at the audience one more time. There, in the third row, she could see her family. Her mother was smiling. Her father looked proud. Carlos was sitting on the edge of his seat. They believed in her. Sarah took a deep breath and began to play. Sarah's fingers found the first keys of Simple Gifts just like they had 1,000 times before during practice. The opening notes rang out clear and true in the silent auditorium. Her right hand played the familiar melody while her left hand pressed the simple chords she had learned so carefully. For the first few measures, Sarah played exactly as she had practiced. Every note was in the right place. Every chord came at the right time. She focused on not making mistakes, on playing the song correctly, just like Mrs. Chun had taught her. The audience listened politely. Sarah could feel their attention, but it didn't seem different from the attention they had given to Jessica's singing or Marcus's guitar playing. She was doing fine, but nothing special was happening. It was just a simple song played simply, but then something began to change. Maybe it was the warmth of the stage lights on her face. Maybe it was the way the piano sound filled the large room. Maybe it was seeing her family's proud faces in the audience. Whatever it was, Sarah began to feel something different about the music. Instead of just thinking about playing the right notes, she started thinking about what the notes meant. Simple Gifts was about being thankful for the small, beautiful things in life. It was about finding joy in everyday moments. As Sarah played, she thought about her own simple gifts. She thought about her mother's kind voice in the morning. She thought about her father's gentle hands when he helped her with homework. She thought about Carlos's silly jokes that always made her laugh. She thought about Mrs. Chen's patient teaching and encouraging smiles. As these thoughts filled her mind, something happened to her playing. Her fingers began to add small touches that weren't in the written music. Nothing big or dramatic, just tiny changes that made the melody more personal. She held some notes a little longer. She played others a little softer. She added small decorations between the main notes. Sarah didn't plan these changes. They just happened naturally, like breathing. Her hands seemed to know what to do without her thinking about it. The simple folk song began to take on new life under her fingers. In the audience, people started to notice something special was happening. Sarah's mother, Rosa, felt tears form in her eyes. She had never heard her shy daughter play like this. The music sounded like it was coming from Sarah's heart, not just from her fingers. Sarah's father, Miguel, leaned forward in his seat. He had expected his daughter to get through the song without embarrassing herself. He had not expected to be moved by her performance. But there was something about the way Sarah was playing that touched him deeply. Even little Carlos stopped bouncing in his seat. He listened with wide eyes as his sister made beautiful music. He had never thought of Sarah as musical before, but now he could see something special happening on stage. Around the auditorium, other audience members were having similar reactions. Parents who had come to support their own children found themselves captivated by this unexpected artist. The music Sarah was creating seemed to wrap around everyone in the room like a warm blanket. Mrs. Chen watched from the side of the stage with amazement. She had taught Simple Gifts to many students over the years. She knew it was a beautiful song, but she had never heard anyone play it like this. Sarah was not just playing the notes. She was expressing something real and honest through the music. On stage, Sarah was barely aware of the audience anymore. She was lost in the music and in her thoughts about Simple Gifts. The piano felt like an extension of herself. The keys responded to her touch like they were part of her own body. She began to vary the rhythm slightly, making some parts a little faster and others a little slower. This gave the music a natural, breathing quality, like a conversation instead of a speech. The song felt alive under her hands. Sarah also started to use the piano's dynamics more creatively. She played some phrases very softly, almost like a whisper, and others with more volume and strength. This created contrast and made the music more interesting to listen to. It was like the difference between reading words on a page and hearing a skilled storyteller tell a tale. The left-hand chords, which Sarah had struggled with so much during practice, now flowed naturally, but she began to add subtle changes here too. Sometimes she would play just the top notes of the chords, creating a lighter texture. Other times she would play the full chords with more emphasis, giving the music more weight and depth. These were not changes that Sarah had planned or practiced. They came from somewhere deeper than her mind. They came from her heart, from her feelings about the music and about the moment. She was discovering that she had musical instincts she never knew existed. The melody itself began to take on new shapes under Sarah's touch. She added small grace notes, quick little decorations that sparkled like jewelry on the main melody. She used slight bending of timing that made the music feel more human and less mechanical. In the middle section of the song, Sarah found herself playing with even more freedom. She repeated certain phrases that she particularly loved, extending the beauty of those moments. She also began to use the full range of the piano, adding some higher notes that rang like bells and some lower notes that provided a rich foundation. The audience was completely quiet now, hanging on every note. This was no longer just a student recital performance. This was something special, something magical. Even the other students waiting backstage had stopped their nervous chatter to listen. Sarah felt like she was floating above the piano bench. The nervousness that had plagued her all day was completely gone. In its place was a feeling of pure joy and connection. She felt connected to the music, to the piano, to the audience, and to something larger than herself. She realized that this was what Mrs. Chun had meant when she talked about playing with heart. This was what it felt like to truly make music instead of just playing notes. This was the difference between performing and expressing. As Sarah moved toward the final section of Simple Gifts, she knew that something important was happening. She could feel it in the quality of the silence around her. She could sense it in the way the music was filling not just the auditorium, but also filling her own spirit. The simple folk song that she had chosen because it seemed easy and safe had become something profound and beautiful. And Sarah was just getting started. As Sarah entered the final section of Simple Gifts, something extraordinary began to happen. The careful boundaries she had built around the song during months of practice started to dissolve. Her muscle memory took over completely, freeing her mind to explore musical territories she had never imagined. What started as small decorations and subtle changes began to blossom into something much more adventurous. Sarah found herself adding entire new melodic lines that seemed to grow naturally from the original tune. These weren't random notes, but musical ideas that felt perfectly right, as if they had always belonged in the song. Her left hand, which had struggled for weeks just to play simple chords, began to create a more complex accompaniment. She started to arpeggiate the chords, breaking them into flowing patterns that danced around the melody. The effect was like adding streams of water flowing around rocks in a riverbed. Sarah discovered that she could make the piano sing in ways she had never known were possible. She learned to use the sustain pedal intuitively, creating layers of sound that blended together like colors in a painting. Some notes rang on while others faded, creating a rich tapestry of harmonies. The melody itself began to transform under her touch. She found herself playing variations on the original tune, exploring different ways to express the same musical ideas. Sometimes she played the melody in a higher octave, making it sparkle like stars. Other times she moved it to the lower registers, giving it a warm, embracing quality. Sarah began to incorporate elements from different musical styles without even realizing it. She added a slight swing to some of the rhythms, giving the song a gentle jazz feeling. She used some chord progressions that hinted at blues music. She even included moments that sounded almost classical in their elegance and sophistication. These influences came from somewhere deep in her musical subconscious. She had absorbed them from years of listening to music on the radio, in movies, and in her daily life. Now, in this moment of pure musical expression, all of these influences came together in a natural and beautiful way. The audience was completely mesmerized. What they were hearing was no longer a simple folk song performed by a nervous teenager. It was a mature, sophisticated musical interpretation that would have impressed professional musicians. Yet it still retained the innocence and honesty that made Sarah's performance so moving. Mrs. Chun stood at the side of the stage with tears in her eyes. In 30 years of teaching music, she had rarely witnessed such a complete transformation. Sarah had gone from a reluctant student who was afraid of being noticed to an artist who was commanding the attention and respect of everyone in the room. The other music students backstage had stopped their preparations entirely. They clustered around the entrance to watch Sarah perform. Some of them had been playing instruments for years, but they had never heard anything like what Sarah was creating. They realized they were witnessing something special, something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Jessica, who had been so confident about her own vocal performance earlier in the evening, felt a mixture of awe and inspiration as she watched Sarah play. She realized that technical skill, while important, was not the most important thing about making music. Sarah was proving that heart and authenticity could create something more beautiful than perfect technique. Marcus, the skilled guitar player, listened to Sarah's improvised harmonies and rhythmic variations with deep appreciation. He recognized that Sarah was doing something he struggled with in his own playing. She was making the music completely her own while still honoring the original composition. Even Amy, the classical piano student who had worked so hard on her Mozart piece, was learning something from Sarah's performance. She saw how Sarah was using space and silence as musical elements, how she was making every note count, how she was communicating emotions through her touch on the keys. Back on stage, Sarah was experiencing a kind of musical awakening. She felt like she was discovering a part of herself that had been hidden her entire life. Her hands moved across the keys with growing confidence and creativity. She was no longer just playing a song. She was telling a story, painting a picture, sharing her soul. The song began to take on the quality of a conversation between different voices. Sometimes her right hand would play a melodic phrase, and her left hand would answer it with a complimentary bass line. Other times, both hands would work together to create complex harmonies that filled the entire range of the piano. Sarah found herself playing with dynamics in ways that created dramatic tension and release. She would build up to powerful, full-bodied moments, then suddenly drop down to the softest whisper. These contrasts kept the audience on the edge of their seats, never knowing what beautiful surprise would come next. She also began to experiment with tempo, making the music breathe and flow like a living thing. Some phrases rushed forward with excitement, while others lingered with contemplative slowness. This natural ebb and flow made the music feel organic and alive, not mechanical or predetermined. In the middle of what should have been the final verse, Sarah made a bold decision. Instead of ending the song as written, she began to develop the melody further. She took the main theme of simple gifts and explored it from new angles, as if she were walking around a beautiful sculpture and seeing it from different perspectives. She played the melody in minor keys, giving it a more mysterious and introspective feeling. Then she brought it back to major keys, but with richer harmonies that made it sound more sophisticated. She found ways to combine different sections of the song, creating new musical relationships that revealed hidden depths in the simple tune. The audience sat in complete silence, afraid that any movement or sound might break the spell that Sarah was weaving. Parents forgot about their own children's performances. Students forgot about their own nervousness. Everyone in the auditorium was united in their appreciation for what they were experiencing. Sarah felt like she was channeling something larger than herself. The music seemed to flow through her rather than from her. She was the conduit for something beautiful and powerful, something that connected her to every person in the room and to the long tradition of musicians who had played this song before. Her dada, she prepared to bring her expanded version of Simple Gifts to a close. Sarah knew that this moment was changing her life. She was discovering that she had a gift she never knew existed, a voice that deserved to be heard, a musical spirit that could touch other people's hearts. The transformation was complete. The shy, reluctant student had become a confident, expressive artist, and there was no going back. The auditorium had transformed from a typical school recital venue into something sacred and magical. What began as polite attention from families and friends had evolved into something much deeper. Every person in that room was experiencing something they had not expected and would never forget. In the third row, Sarah's mother Rosa found herself crying openly. These were not tears of nervousness or worry about her daughter's performance. These were tears of wonder and pride and recognition. She was hearing her quiet, shy daughter speak in a voice more eloquent and powerful than any words could ever be. Rosa thought about all the times she had worried about Sarah. She had watched her daughter hide in corners at family gatherings. She had seen Sarah choose the back seat in every classroom, the last spot in every line. She had wondered if Sarah would ever find her place in the world, ever discover what made her special. Now, listening to the incredible music flowing from the stage, Rosa understood that Sarah had always been special. The gift had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Rosa felt like she was meeting her daughter for the first time. Next to her, Miguel sat in stunned silence. He was a practical man who worked with his hands, fixing cars and machinery. He understood tools and engines and things he could touch and see. Music had always seemed like something mysterious and foreign to him, but what Sarah was creating on that piano made perfect sense to him. It spoke to him in a language that went beyond words or explanations. He could hear stories in her music, could feel emotions he didn't have names for. His daughter was showing him that there were kinds of intelligence and skill he had never considered. Miguel found himself thinking about his own father, Sarah's grandfather, who had died when Sarah was very young. The old man had played guitar and sung folk songs in Spanish during family gatherings. Miguel had always thought that musical ability had skipped his generation entirely. Now he realized it had been waiting for Sarah. Little Carlos had stopped fidgeting completely. At 8 years old, he had the attention span of a butterfly and could rarely sit still for more than a few minutes. But Sarah's music held him transfixed. He didn't understand what was happening technically, but he could feel that something important and beautiful was occurring. Carlos looked around the auditorium and saw that all the adults had the same expression on their faces. They looked amazed and peaceful at the same time. He felt proud that his sister was the one making everyone feel this way. He decided that when people asked him what his sister was good at, he would say she was good at making magic. Throughout the auditorium, similar scenes were playing out. Parents who had come to support their own children found themselves completely absorbed in Sarah's performance. The music seemed to touch something universal in every listener. Regardless of their age or background or musical experience, Mrs. Henderson, who taught second grade at the elementary school, sat in the back row wiping away tears. She had attended dozens of student recitals over the years, always trying to be supportive but often finding her mind wandering to lesson plans and grocery lists. But tonight, Sarah's music demanded her complete attention. Mrs. Henderson found herself thinking about beauty and the unexpected places it could be found. She thought about her young students and wondered what hidden gifts they might possess. She made a mental note to pay more attention, to look more carefully for the quiet ones who might be carrying secrets worth discovering. Dr. Patel, the school principal, had come to the recital out of obligation. He tried to attend school events to show support for the arts programs, but he usually spent the time thinking about budget meetings and test scores. Tonight was different. Dr. Patel recognized that he was witnessing exactly the kind of moment that justified every dollar spent on music education. This was why the arts mattered. Not because they produced test scores or college scholarships, but because they gave young people a way to discover and express their deepest selves. In the middle section of the auditorium, other families were having profound reactions to Sarah's performance. The Johnsons, whose daughter Amy had just played Mozart so skillfully, looked at each other with new understanding. They had always focused on technical excellence in Amy's piano lessons, but Sarah was showing them that music could be about much more than perfect execution. Mr. and Mrs. Garcia, whose son was in Sarah's class but not performing tonight, held hands as they listened. The music was reminding them of their own courtship, of quiet moments they had shared, of the simple gifts in their own lives. Sarah's interpretation of the old folk song was helping them remember what mattered most. Even the teenagers in the audience, who usually found school events boring, were completely engaged. Some of them were students in other classes who had come to support friends. Others were older siblings who had been dragged along by their parents. None of them had expected to be moved by a folk song played on piano, but Sarah's music transcended age and genre. She was proving that authenticity and emotion could make any song powerful, that a simple melody could carry profound meaning when played with genuine feeling. The other music students who were waiting backstage to perform were having the most intense reactions of all. They understood better than anyone what Sarah was accomplishing. They knew how difficult it was to play with such freedom and expression. They recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Jennifer, who was scheduled to perform after Sarah, felt her own nervousness disappear entirely. Sarah's performance was showing her that the recital wasn't about competition or comparison. It was about sharing something personal and meaningful with people who cared about you. David, who played trumpet and was feeling worried about his jazz piece, gained new confidence from watching Sarah. She was proving that musical rules could be bent, that improvisation and personal expression were more important than staying exactly within prescribed boundaries. Even some of the more advanced students, who had initially looked down on Sarah's simple song choice, were feeling humbled and inspired. Sarah was teaching them that sophistication came from depth of feeling, not complexity of technique. The collective attention of the audience had created an almost physical presence in the room. It was as if everyone's focused listening had generated a kind of energy that supported and amplified Sarah's performance. She could feel this energy flowing back to her from the audience, encouraging her to reach even deeper into her musical soul. The usual sounds of a school auditorium had completely disappeared. No one coughed or shifted in their seats. No programs rustled, no cell phones buzzed. The air conditioning system seemed to have quieted itself out of respect. The only sound in the room was Sarah's magnificent music, filling every corner with warmth and beauty. Outside the auditorium, people walking by had stopped to listen. The janitor paused in his work, leaning on his mop to hear the music drifting through the walls. Even some neighbors from across the street had stepped onto their porches, drawn by the unusual beauty of what they could hear. The room had awakened to the presence of something truly special, and everyone present knew they were sharing in a moment that would stay with them forever. As Sarah approached what would become the most extraordinary part of her performance, she felt completely free from any fear or self-doubt. The piano had become an extension of her soul, and she was ready to pour everything she had discovered about herself into this final section of music. She began to weave together musical elements from traditions she had absorbed without even knowing it. Her right hand started to incorporate the syncopated rhythms of jazz music, giving Simple Gifts a sophisticated swing that made people want to move in their seats. The melody danced and bounced in ways that surprised and delighted everyone listening. At the same time, her left hand was creating bass lines that drew from blues music. She played deep, rich notes that seemed to come from the earth itself, grounding the lighter melody with something solid and emotional. The combination created a musical conversation between joy and depth, between simplicity and complexity. Sarah found herself adding classical elements as well. She played rapid scales that sparkled like water in sunlight, connecting different sections of the song with brilliant bridges of sound. She used techniques she had never learned formally but seemed to understand instinctively, as if the piano was teaching her in real time. The harmonies she created were becoming increasingly sophisticated. She played chords that included notes she had never seen in her simple sheet music, but they sounded perfectly right. Her ear was guiding her to musical choices that trained musicians would have found impressive and surprising. The rhythm became more adventurous as well. Sarah began to play with time in ways that created tension and release, speeding up in some places and slowing down in others. She used pauses and silences as musical elements, letting moments of quiet emphasize the beauty of the notes that followed. In one breathtaking passage, Sarah played the main melody of Simple Gifts in her right hand while her left hand played a completely different but complementary melody. The two melodies wove together like dancers, sometimes matching each other step for step, other times moving in opposite directions before coming back together in perfect harmony. She began to use the full range of the piano, from the deepest bass notes to the highest treble. The low notes rumbled like distant thunder, while the high notes chimed like church bells. The effect was orchestral, as if Sarah was conducting an entire symphony from the piano bench. The audience was witnessing something that rarely happens even in professional concerts. They were seeing a musician discover her own voice in real time, watching talent bloom like a flower opening to the sun. The transformation was so complete that it seemed almost magical. Mrs. Chun, watching from the side of the stage, knew she was witnessing the birth of a true musician. She had seen students improve over time, had watched them develop skill and confidence, but she had never seen anyone transform so completely in a single performance. Sarah was becoming someone entirely new before everyone's eyes. The emotional depth of Sarah's playing was reaching levels that touched the core of every listener. She played with the wisdom of someone who had lived many lives, even though she was only 17 years old. The music carried the weight of all human experience. Joy and sorrow and hope and longing all woven together. In one particularly moving section, Sarah played the melody so softly that people had to hold their breath to hear it. The gentle notes seemed to float in the air like whispered secrets. Then she gradually built the volume and intensity, adding layers of harmony and rhythm until the music filled the entire auditorium with power and majesty. She incorporated elements of folk music from different cultures, though she couldn't have named where these influences came from. There were hints of Irish ballads, Spanish flamenco, African rhythms, and Native American melodies. It was as if the simple shaker tune had become a vehicle for expressing the musical heritage of all humanity. The technical aspects of her playing had reached levels that amazed even herself. Her fingers moved across the keys with perfect precision, even as she played passages she had never practiced or even imagined. Her hands seemed to know exactly where to go and what to do, guided by musical instincts she was discovering for the first time. As Sarah built toward the final climax of her performance, she felt like she was channeling something much larger than herself. The music seemed to be flowing through her from some cosmic source, using her hands and heart as instruments to create something beautiful and meaningful. She played a magnificent crescendo that seemed to lift everyone in the auditorium off their seats. The music swelled and soared, incorporating every element she had explored during her performance and combining them into something transcendent. The simple folk song had become a symphony of human emotion and experience. Then, in a moment of perfect musical instinct, Sarah began to bring everything back to where it started. She gradually simplified the harmonies, slowed the rhythm, and returned to the basic melody of simple gifts. But now the simple tune carried all the weight and beauty of everything that had come before. The final notes were played with such tenderness and meaning that they seemed to hang in the air like prayers. Sarah held the last chord longer than written, letting its beauty fade naturally into silence. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the silence that followed was profound and complete. For several long moments, nobody moved. The audience sat in stunned appreciation, almost afraid to break the spell that Sarah had woven. They had just experienced something extraordinary, something that had transformed a simple school recital into an unforgettable artistic event. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with one person, then another, then spread throughout the auditorium like wildfire. But this was not ordinary applause. This was the kind of appreciation reserved for moments of true artistic greatness. People rose to their feet, one by one, until the entire auditorium was standing. The applause grew louder and more enthusiastic, mixed with cheers and shouts of appreciation. Some people were crying, others were laughing with joy, and all were united in their recognition of what they had just witnessed. Sarah sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected polite applause, perhaps some encouraging smiles from her family. She had never imagined anything like this. The standing ovation continued for several minutes, with people refusing to stop clapping and cheering. Finally, Sarah stood up and took a bow, just as Mrs. Chun had taught her. But her bow was different now. It was the bow of a true artist, acknowledging the appreciation of her audience. She was no longer the shy, reluctant student who had walked onto the stage. She was a musician who had found her voice and shared it with the world. As Sarah walked off the stage, her legs felt shaky again, but for completely different reasons than when she had walked on. The nervousness was gone, replaced by a kind of glowing energy she had never felt before. She felt like she had discovered a secret room in her own house, a part of herself that had been there all along but hidden from view. Backstage, the other students were waiting for her with expressions of amazement and admiration. Jennifer was the first to speak, her voice filled with awe. "Sarah, that was incredible," she said. "I had no idea you could play like that." "Neither did I," Sarah replied honestly. It was the truth. She was still trying to understand what had just happened to her on that stage. The remaining students performed their pieces, but everyone knew that something special had already occurred that evening. The other performances were good, some were even excellent, but none could match the magic that Sarah had created. Mrs. Chun was so proud that she could barely contain herself. During the final bows, when all the students came on stage together, she made a special point to stand next to Sarah and whisper, "You have discovered something wonderful tonight. This is just the beginning." After the recital ended, Sarah was surrounded by people wanting to talk to her. Parents she had never met came up to congratulate her. Some of them had tears in their eyes as they described how her music had moved them. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard," said Mrs. Patterson, whose son was in Sarah's math class. "You have a rare gift, young lady." Sarah's own family could barely find words to express how they felt. Her mother hugged her tightly and said, "Mia, I am so proud of you. You were magnificent." Her father, who was not usually good with emotional words, simply looked at her with wonder and said, "Sarah, you are full of surprises." Even Carlos was impressed. "Sarah, you made everyone cry, but in a good way," he said, which was perhaps the best review of all. In the days that followed, word of Sarah's performance spread throughout the school and the community. Students who had not been at the recital asked to hear recordings of her playing. Teachers who had taught Sarah in other subjects looked at her with new respect and curiosity. The local newspaper heard about the remarkable performance and sent a reporter to interview Sarah. The reporter, Maria Santos, was a music lover herself and had attended many professional concerts. She was amazed to learn that Sarah had no formal training beyond her school music class. "What you did that night was extraordinary," Maria told Sarah during the interview. "Professional musicians spend years learning to improvise and interpret music the way you did naturally." The newspaper article titled, "Hidden Musical Genius Emerges at Local School Recital," brought even more attention to Sarah's talent. The story was picked up by other news outlets, and soon Sarah was receiving calls and letters from music teachers and schools from across the state. Several prestigious music schools offered Sarah scholarships to attend their summer programs. The director of the State Youth Symphony invited her to audition for their program. A well-known piano teacher from the nearby university offered to give Sarah lessons for free, but perhaps the most meaningful response came from ordinary people in the community who had been at the recital. Sarah received dozens of letters and cards from audience members describing how her music had affected them. One letter came from an elderly man named Frank, who wrote, "Dear Sarah, I am 78 years old and I have been to many concerts in my life, but your performance of Simple Gifts reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Thank you for sharing your gift with us." Another letter came from a young mother. "My daughter was having trouble sleeping after a difficult time in our family. I played a recording of your performance for her, and it calmed her immediately." Music has healing power, and you have that power in your hands. Sarah read every letter carefully. She was amazed to learn that her music had touched so many people in so many different ways. She began to understand that her gift came with a responsibility to share it with others. The most important conversation came with Mrs. Chun a few weeks after the recital. Sarah stayed after music class to talk with her teacher about all the opportunities that were being offered to her. "I don't know what to do," Sarah told Mrs. Chun. 6 months ago, I had never played piano. Now everyone is telling me I should make music my career. It's all happening so fast." Mrs. Chun sat down at the piano bench next to Sarah. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "I want to keep learning. I want to understand what happened to me that night. I want to be able to make that kind of music again." "Then that's what you should do," Mrs. Chun said. "Take the lessons. Go to the summer program. Learn everything you can. But remember, the most important thing you have is already inside you. All the training in the world can't give someone what you discovered on that stage." Sarah decided to accept the university teacher's offer of free lessons and to attend one of the summer music programs. But she also made another decision. She wanted to keep playing simple music for ordinary people, not just complex pieces for musicians and critics. She started volunteering to play at the local nursing home, where her simple, heartfelt interpretations of familiar songs brought joy to residents who rarely had visitors. She played at community events and charity fundraisers, always choosing music that spoke to people's hearts rather than showing off technical skill. Sarah also continued to work with Mrs. Chen to help other shy students in the music program. She remembered what it felt like to be afraid and uncertain, and she wanted to help other young people discover their own hidden gifts. Years later, Sarah would go on to study music in college and become a professional musician. She would perform in concert halls and recording studios around the world. She would win awards and receive recognition for her artistry, but she would always remember that spring evening when she was 17 years old and chose to play a simple tune for a school recital. That was the night she learned that the most profound magic often comes from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries happen when we stop trying so hard to be impressive and start trying to be authentic. Sarah kept the original sheet music for Simple Gifts in a frame on her piano, a reminder of the night when she learned that she had been carrying a gift inside herself all along. The shy girl who had wanted nothing more than to be invisible had found her voice, and that voice would never be silent again. Most importantly, Sarah learned that gifts are meant to be shared. The magic she had discovered that night was not just for her own benefit, but for everyone whose life could be touched by music. She had learned that when you offer your authentic self to the world responds with wonder and gratitude. The simple tune had taught her the most important lesson of all, that the greatest gifts in life are often the ones we never knew we had, waiting patiently for the right moment to emerge and transform everything.